Michael confessed that he had been cheating on me with my sister at our usual cafe, where I was planning to tell him that I was finally pregnant after 5 years of trying. Michael and I have been married for 5 years now. I thought our marriage was perfect until my husband suddenly confessed to having an affair with my sister Ashley, of all people. You see, while he's a senior administrator at Central Hospital where we both work, I'm just an administrative assistant in the outpatient department. To outsiders, this might seem like a challenging dynamic, but it brings its own set of complexities into our relationship. The long hours, the constant pressure of hospital bureaucracy, and the fact that Michael is technically several levels above me in the organizational hierarchy have always added an extra layer of tension to our marriage. I've always worked hard to prove myself capable in my role, handling patient records and coordinating with various departments efficiently. Even though I don't have the prestigious medical degree that Michael has, I take pride in how I built my career from the ground up. But there have been moments when the weight of our professional gap made things more difficult, especially when Michael would casually mention his MBA or his latest executive meeting. Despite these challenges, I thought we managed to support each other. He was my partner, and I never had any doubt that I would spend the rest of my life with him. In fact, 2 months ago, I discovered I was pregnant, something we had been trying to achieve for 5 long years. Trying to start a family. When we first got married, Michael and I were eager to start a family. Being a hospital administrator, he was always talking about legacy and building something meaningful. We tried for what felt like forever, scheduling our attempts around his executive meetings and my administrative shifts. But despite our hopes and best efforts, it just never happened for us. Eventually, we made peace with it. We stopped actively trying, telling ourselves that if it was meant to be, it would happen in its own time. Letting go of that dream was especially hard for me, watching all the expectant mothers coming through our outpatient department day after day. But I poured my energy into my work, organizing files, coordinating appointments, and building relationships with our regular patients. Michael threw himself into his administrative duties, climbing the corporate ladder at the hospital with impressive speed. So when I suddenly started experiencing morning sickness, I didn't immediately jump to conclusions. Part of me thought it might just be stress from our busy spring registration period, or maybe something I ate in the hospital cafeteria. But after the third morning of feeling queasy while sorting through insurance paperwork, I decided to take a pregnancy test, just to rule out the possibility. When the result came back positive, I was completely floored. It was such an overwhelming moment, sitting there in the staff bathroom, staring at that little plastic stick that held such life-changing news. I never thought that after all these years of watching other women come through our fertility clinic, I would be the one experiencing this miracle. The emotions washed over me in waves as I sat at my desk, trying to focus on patient files but barely able to contain my joy. Planning the announcement. At that moment, my first thought was to share the news with Michael. I knew how much this would mean to him, especially after all our failed attempts. But he was away in Boston, attending a series of hospital management conferences where he was presenting our facility's latest efficiency protocols. This news felt too important to be shared over a quick text message or hasty phone call between his presentations. I decided to wait until he returned, wanting to tell him face to face. I imagined seeing his expression change as I shared our miracle, picturing how meaningful it would be to experience this moment together. The day Michael was supposed to return from his conference, I had everything planned perfectly. I wanted to make the moment special, so I arranged for us to meet at our favorite cafe near the hospital, the quiet little place where we used to have lunch together before he got promoted to senior management. It was the kind of cozy, intimate setting where we'd shared so many important moments before. The staff knew us well, or at least they used to, back when Michael wasn't too busy with executive lunches to join me there. I thought it would be the perfect place to start this new chapter of our lives. At the airport. When I went to pick him up at the airport, though, I could immediately sense that something was off. Michael looked preoccupied, his usual confident stride replaced with distracted, uncertain steps. He was wearing his expensive navy suit, the one he reserved for important presentations, but his tie was loosened and his collar rumpled, so unlike his usual meticulous appearance. He barely acknowledged me, offering only a curt nod instead of our usual warm embrace. There was no excitement in his eyes at seeing me after being apart, no gentle kiss on my cheek, nothing that resembled our normal reunions. He barely said hello, keeping his eyes fixed on his phone as he wheeled his leather briefcase behind him. Tension rising, I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe the conference had been particularly stressful, or perhaps his presentation hadn't gone as well as he'd hoped. I mentioned our reservation at the cafe, thinking a quiet lunch together might help him decompress. But to my surprise, he sighed heavily, visibly irritated, and suggested we should probably just head home instead. "I've got a pile of emails to catch up on," he said sharply, his tone more fitting for addressing a subordinate than his wife. "I don't have time for cafe stops today." I was taken aback by his reaction. It wasn't like we had any other pressing plans, and I thought a nice lunch together would help him transition back from his business mindset. "We're going to end up ordering takeout anyway," I reasoned, trying to keep my voice light. "We might as well enjoy a proper meal together first." He let out another exasperated sigh and gave me a curt nod, the kind he usually reserved for dismissing suggestions in staff meetings. Then, as if I weren't even there, he went back to scrolling through his phone, completely ignoring me as I drove us to the cafe. At the cafe, by the time we got there, the atmosphere between us felt heavier than the stack of medical records I process each day. We took our seats at our usual corner table, but Michael hardly spoke a word. The waitress, Jenny, who had known us for years, seemed to sense the tension and quietly brought our usual orders without the friendly chat we normally shared. Wanting to ease the tension, I asked him about the conference, hoping to spark some conversation. "How did your presentation go? Did they like your new efficiency protocols?" But his responses were cold and distant, just one-word answers that led nowhere. "Fine. Yes. Whatever." It was so unlike him. Normally, after these conferences, he would enthusiastically share stories about the other administrators he'd met, the new management strategies he'd learned, or the potential partnerships he'd discussed. But today, it felt like he was holding something back, and I couldn't help but wonder what was really going on. Signs of change. To be fair, I had noticed a slight shift in Michael's behavior in the weeks before our lunch that day. Working in the same hospital, I would sometimes see him walking through the corridors with his executive team, but lately he'd started avoiding my floor entirely. He had been growing increasingly distant, and while part of me was concerned, I initially chalked it up to the usual stress that comes with hospital administration. Our jobs at the hospital are demanding in different ways. His dealing with budget meetings and stakeholder presentations, mine handling the endless flow of patient records and insurance claims. We'd both been through rough patches before due to work pressures, and I assumed this was just another one of those times. I kept telling myself that he would eventually open up once things settled down, that his mood would improve after the conference. But sitting across from him at the cafe that day, watching him barely touch his coffee and hardly acknowledge my presence, I began to feel more and more uneasy. His usual commanding presence had been replaced by a nervous energy I'd never seen before. He kept checking his phone every few minutes, angling it away from my view in a way he'd never done before. The confession. Still, I tried to push the nervousness aside. I had waited so long to tell him about the baby, and despite the tension between us, I was desperate to share the news. I thought maybe, just maybe, hearing about the pregnancy would snap him out of whatever was bothering him. and we could find joy in this life-changing moment together. But as I was gathering the courage to tell him, just when I was about to share what should have been the happiest news of our lives, Michael looked up from his untouched sandwich, his voice low and steady, and said the words I never imagined hearing. "I've been cheating on you." The devastating truth. At first, I didn't even register what he said. The cafe was busy with the usual lunch crowd, the clinking of cups and murmur of conversations nearly drowning out his words. For a second, I thought I had misheard. I let out a nervous laugh and asked, "What?" as if his words had been some kind of mistake. But then he looked me in the eyes, something he hadn't really done all day, and repeated himself, this time more clearly, with an emotionless, almost administrative tone, like he was delivering a budget report. "I have been sleeping with Ashley." In that moment, the world around me seemed to stop. My face went numb. My husband, the man who held a position of authority at our hospital, was sleeping with my sister Ashley, a nurse in the pediatric ward. The same sister who I'd helped get the job at our hospital. The same sister who I'd supported through her nursing school struggles. I stared at him, my mind struggling to grasp the meaning of his words. "What do you mean?" I asked again, though deep down I already knew. I didn't want to believe it, but the look on his face left no room for doubt. He just sat there, staring straight at me with that same detached expression he used during staff termination meetings. There was no remorse, no sign of the man I thought I knew, the man I had loved and trusted for all these years. It felt like everything I had known, our marriage, our life at the hospital, even my own sister, was crumbling right in front of me, and I was powerless to stop it. My eyes began to well up with tears, and I could feel the sting of betrayal deep in my chest, like a wrongly administered injection that couldn't be undone. The details emerge. With a trembling voice, I asked him, "When did it start?" I needed to know, even though each word felt like filling out an incident report I never wanted to complete. He began to tell me, almost casually, as if he were discussing hospital protocols, how he and Ashley had been sleeping together for the past few months. The affair started after Ashley had broken up with her last boyfriend, another doctor from the cardiology department. She was devastated after the breakup and had started coming to my department more frequently, claiming she needed emotional support during her shifts. I remember those days vividly. I had welcomed her visits, thinking how nice it was that she could find comfort in being near family during her work hours. I even adjusted her break times in the hospital scheduling system so she could have lunch with us. But little did I know what was really happening. Behind my back, between hospital corridors and staff meetings, Michael and Ashley were getting closer in ways I could have never imagined. Yes, they had always been friendly at hospital functions and staff gatherings. In fact, I remember thinking how professional it was that my husband and sister could maintain such a cordial working relationship despite our family connection. It gave me comfort knowing that we could all coexist so well in the same workplace. But never in my wildest nightmares did I think they were close, that they were sleeping together in the same hospital where we all worked. The breaking point. I couldn't process the enormity of it, the betrayal from both my direct supervisor and my own sister. As Michael continued to speak, explaining his affair with the same methodical precision he used in administrative meetings, I felt everything around me start to blur, like a poorly scanned medical document. I didn't want to hear him anymore. Nothing made sense. My stomach turned, reminiscent of my recent morning sickness, but for an entirely different reason. The escape. I grabbed my purse from the back of my chair and stood up abruptly. I didn't care that we were in the middle of the crowded cafe where many of our hospital colleagues often had lunch. I didn't care that people might have been watching one of their administrative staff members having a breakdown. I just had to get out of there. Michael started calling after me as I rushed toward the exit, using the same authoritative tone he used in staff meetings. "Emily." You're being unprofessional. Get back here. But I kept walking, pushing through the door, and practically running to my car. It was only when I was in my car, pulling out of the parking lot, that my phone started ringing. It was Michael, of course. Over and over he called, not to apologize, but to scold me for abandoning him at the cafe and for making a scene in front of potential hospital board members who might have been there. I screamed into the phone, telling him to get an Uber and leave me alone. I could barely see the road through my tears as I drove towards my apartment, my mind racing with memories of all the times I'd seen them together at the hospital, now tainted with a horrible new understanding. At the apartment. When I finally got home, I locked myself in our bedroom, the same room where I'd taken that life-changing pregnancy test just weeks ago. That's when I broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably as the reality of what had just happened crashed down on me. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. My husband, the senior hospital administrator, and my own sister, the pediatric nurse. How could they betray me like this? I cried until I had no tears left, and my body was completely exhausted from the emotional overload. Later that evening, at some point, Michael must have made it back to the apartment. I heard him using his key in the lock, his footsteps in the hallway, as methodical as his daily hospital rounds. He started knocking on the bedroom door, his voice muffled through the wood, still carrying that administrative tone he couldn't seem to shake off. "Emily, we need to discuss this like rational adults," he called through the door. This emotional response isn't productive, but I couldn't bear to deface him. I couldn't listen to him talk about our marriage like it was just another hospital procedure that needed reviewing. I refused to open the door, lying on the bed curled up in a ball as my tears stained the pillow. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but at some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke up, it was already midnight. The apartment was eerily quiet, and Michael had stopped knocking. The discovery. I decided to head to the kitchen to get something to drink, my throat raw from crying. When I got to the living room, I saw Michael asleep on the couch, his tablet resting on the coffee table beside him, probably still logged into the hospital's administrative system. The sight of him lying there looking so peaceful made my blood boil. How could he sleep so easily after what he had just confessed to me? I stood there for a moment, seething with anger and disbelief, before my gaze shifted to his personal phone next to the tablet. I had never done this before, not once in our entire marriage. But that night, for the first time, I unlocked Michael's phone. He hadn't even bothered to change his passcode, our wedding date, probably because he was so confident that his administrative assistant wife would never dare to question him. He was so sure of my trust, so certain I'd never doubt him. Oh, what a fool I had been. How could I have been so blind to what was happening right in my own hospital? The evidence. As I scrolled through his messages with Ashley, my heart raced, dreading what I would find, but needing to know the full truth. And there it was, countless messages between the senior administrator and the pediatric nurse, my husband, and my sister. Multiple inappropriate photos they had sent each other, each one more painful to look at than the last. Screenshots of their private conversations during hospital hours, planning secret meetings in the on-call rooms, and discussing which security cameras to avoid. They had even arranged to meet up at hotels near the medical conferences he attended, all while I was processing endless paperwork back at the hospital. The texts from Ashley were what really shattered me. In one of them, she had written about how exciting it was to sneak around during hospital hours, how thrilling it was to pass me in the hallway, knowing she had just been with my husband. She went so far as to say that the secrecy made everything more intense. I couldn't believe this was real. My own sister, who I'd helped get this nursing position, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And Michael, the man I had supported through every career advancement, had so easily thrown our marriage away. Making a decision. With my hands trembling, I took photos of their messages on my own phone, documenting everything like I would a critical patient file. Once I had what I needed, I went back upstairs quietly. I began packing my things, knowing I couldn't stay in this apartment, under the same roof as Michael. I wasn't going to raise this baby in an environment of lies and betrayal, especially not with a husband who had turned our workplace into his personal playground for infidelity. I threw a few essentials into a bag, my hands shaking with every item I packed, just like they did when I had to handle particularly difficult cases at work. Once I was done, I drove straight to my parents' house in the suburbs, leaving behind the apartment complex where so many hospital staff lived, including my sister. At parents' house. When I arrived at my parents' place, they were surprised to see me, but I didn't go into details right away. I couldn't. I just told them I needed to stay with them for a while, and thankfully, they didn't ask too many questions that night. Ever since that night, I've been staying with my parents, trying to figure out how to handle both my personal life and my professional situation at the hospital. The aftermath. Yes, I'm currently going through the process of separating from Michael. After everything that has happened, I've wasted no time in filing for divorce. There's no going back after this level of betrayal, especially not when it involves my own workplace. My parents are furious, and they've completely cut Ashley off after finding out everything. They're embarrassed by what she has done, especially since they were the ones who encouraged her to follow me into the healthcare field. She's no longer welcome in our family. Ashley has called me multiple times to apologize, repeatedly claiming from her nursing station that it was all just a huge mistake, but I don't know if I can ever forgive her. Ironically, the support I've received from Michael's family has been overwhelming, especially considering that it's their son who caused this mess. From the moment they found out about his infidelity, they made it very clear that they were deeply disappointed in him. His mother, who sits on the hospital board, was particularly devastated. They don't approve of what he's done and have taken a firm stance. They've told him that they are going to refuse to accept my sister as part of their family. It's like they see Michael for who he truly is now, and they've made no effort to hide their disgust. The pregnancy reveal. I had kept my pregnancy a secret from Michael and his family for as long as I could. The thought of sharing such happy news in the middle of all this workplace chaos seemed impossible. But 2 weeks ago, after returning from my prenatal appointment at a different hospital across town and talking about it with my parents, I couldn't keep this big news to myself any longer. When I finally met with Michael in a neutral coffee shop to tell him about the pregnancy, I had already mentally prepared myself for a difficult conversation. However, nothing could have prepared me for the cruelty of his reaction, as he immediately switched into his cold, administrative mode. "Are you trying to manipulate me?" he accused, his voice carrying the same tone he used when questioning staff about budget discrepancies. "Is this some kind of attempt to keep your position at the hospital? Are you jealous because Ashley's career is advancing faster than yours?" His words cut deep, especially coming from someone who had watched me process countless fertility clinic paperwork over the years. Then he actually looked at me with those cold, management eyes and said he hoped I would lose the baby since he didn't want it anyway. He stated, as if delivering a quarterly report, that if I continued with the pregnancy, he wanted nothing to do with me or the baby. My body was trembling with anger hearing his words, and at that moment, if I hadn't been pregnant, I swear I would have thrown my coffee right in his face. But I had to keep it together for the sake of my baby, the baby that he didn't want, the baby that was innocent in all of this administrative nightmare. The confrontation. I took a deep breath, like I would before handling a particularly difficult patient file, and made it clear to him that I wasn't trying to trap him or force him into anything. Speaking in the same professional tone he always used, I informed him that I had only told him about the pregnancy because it was my duty to inform him as the father of this child. But as for me, I wanted nothing to do with him, and he needn't worry about me ever wanting him back. All I expected from him was to fulfill his legal obligation and pay child support when the time came. Just another monthly payment to process, as far as I was concerned. He tried to argue with me, of course, using the same authoritative voice he used in department meetings. But I simply gathered my things and walked away, just as I had seen countless employees do after his harsh performance reviews. Family support. Later, I also had to tell Michael's family about my pregnancy, since I felt that they deserved to know. Their reaction was immediate. His parents, particularly his mother, who held influence at the hospital board, came over as soon as they found out, and they've been nothing but supportive since. They've assured me repeatedly that if Michael continues to not accept responsibility for the baby, then they'll make sure that the child is well taken care of. In fact, they're so furious with Michael that they've gone as far as to say they'll make sure a large part of the family trust, including shares in the hospital, will go directly to the baby, not to him. They've made it clear that if he chooses this life with Ashley and abandons his responsibility to be a present father for the child, then he won't see a penny of his inheritance ever again, nor will he maintain his cushy position in hospital administration. Ashley's message. Well, after that conversation with Michael and his family, I received a message from Ashley this week. She sent it through our hospital's internal messaging system, of all places, apologizing again and saying how she hated herself for how she had broken up my family. She wrote that after finding out about my pregnancy from the aboard gossip, she had decided to leave Michael for good and request a transfer to a different hospital unit. She assured me that she would never show her face in my department again, and that all she wished for was for my baby to grow up well. Just like all the other incident reports I'd filed over the years, I archived her message without reply. Michael's change of heart. But now Michael's behavior seems to have completely shifted. After everything he's put me through, from his cruel accusations of manipulation to wishing harm on our child, he suddenly wants another chance. Although he still has no idea about the promises his parents have made regarding the hospital shares and inheritance, what's really driving him is the fact that his entire world has started to collapse around him. Ashley has left him and requested a department transfer. His family has completely turned their backs on him, and even our colleagues at the hospital have started treating him differently. The nurses avoid eye contact. The administrative staff whisper when he passes, and even other executives seem to be distancing themselves. The once confident, arrogant senior administrator who thought he could get away with anything is now feeling the full weight of his actions in every corner of the hospital. The final confrontation. So now he has conveniently decided that he wants to be a part of my life again, and for the sake of our child, no less. He's been trying to frame it as though he suddenly cares about creating a stable environment for our baby, using the same persuasive tone he uses in board meetings. He even had the audacity to schedule a professional discussion in his office about our future. When I laughed at his absurd demands and told him I wasn't going back to him, he didn't take it well, of course. True to his management style, he turned things around and attacked me again, calling me a bad mother, in the same tone he used to criticize underperforming staff. According to him, I'm the one who's going to ruin our child's life because I won't let him play happy family now that his life has fallen apart for his own stupid mistakes. He even went as far as to say he would make sure our child grows up hating me for breaking up our family, treating our personal life like another one of his strategic planning sessions. Update on family dynamics. To clarify a few points, as for everyone asking about the kind of relationship Ashley and I had before all this, well, what can I say? We'd had a normal sibling relationship all our lives. We both worked our way up in the hospital system, though she fast-tracked through nursing school while I took the administrative route. Neither of us was the golden child of the family, and both of us were equally loved by our parents. We never had any major fights or jealousy between us, even when working in the same hospital. I have always loved my sister through thick and thin, which is why this hurts more than any performance review or disciplinary action ever could. My sister did something I can't imagine doing to anyone, not even to the most difficult patient. I am glad that Ashley left him after finding out about my pregnancy. I mean, that man had the audacity to break up our marriage, thinking that he could get away with a younger version of me in a nurse's uniform. But too bad he lost her too. Of course, this doesn't mean that I'm going to ever forgive Ashley, but I am just glad that Michael is all alone now in his corner office. The final attempt. Michael decided to come over to my parents' place to try to fix things again, bringing the same presentation folder he uses for hospital board meetings. But this time, things got even worse. First, he started trying to convince me again to get back together, using his practiced administrative voice. He told me how parents sometimes need to make sacrifices for their children, sounding like he was giving another lecture on hospital policy. He went on about how our baby deserved to grow up with two parents instead of one, as if he was discussing optimal staffing levels. But I was tired of his corporate approach to our personal life. I reminded him bluntly that not too long ago, he didn't even want this baby. He had wished I would have a miscarriage, for crying out loud. Now suddenly he's preaching about the importance of family and sacrifice, like it was another hospital initiative. When I threw that in his face, he tried to backtrack, saying that maybe once he held the baby, his mind would change, the same way he claimed budget cuts would eventually benefit everyone. His words were hollow, just like every promise he'd made about departmental improvements. Shifting blame. But instead of accepting responsibility, Michael decided to turn things around on me, just like he did when facing criticism from the board. He started accusing me of causing his affair, saying how I had stopped showing him affection for months, and that I was always busy with paperwork. He claimed he had expected me to slow down my career after we got married, to be more of a supportive wife to an administrator, rather than focusing on my own role in the hospital. I couldn't help but scoff. This was classic Michael, always trying to shift the blame like he did with failed hospital policies. He knew exactly who I was before we got married. We had been co-workers for years before we got together. So why was he suddenly acting surprised that I was dedicated to my work? It wasn't like I ever hid my commitment to my job. In fact, we had bonded over our shared dedication to the hospital, even if we worked on different floors. The final breakdown. That's when he started whining about Ashley. He said she had been there for him when he was feeling vulnerable, blaming me for not even noticing their secret meetings during hospital hours. He actually had the nerve to suggest that if I had been more attentive to the hospital gossip, I might have caught them sooner. It was as if he was trying to make me feel guilty for not detecting their affair, like I had failed some sort of administrative oversight duty. At this point, I was seething. I told him flat out that he needed to stop trying to blame me for his infidelity. He was the one who crossed the line, not me, and even his own mother on the hospital board knew that what he did was unforgivable. They had taken my side for a reason. They saw him for who he really was, not the polished hospital administrator, but a cheating husband who abused his position. Michael scoffed, his executive arrogance flaring up again, and said that his parents loved him and would eventually forgive him no matter what, just like they had overlooked his previous administrative mishaps. So that's when I couldn't hold it in any longer. I told him the truth, that his parents were done with him, and that they had already decided to cut him off from both his inheritance and his hospital shares. Not only that, but all that security was going to our baby instead of him. The violent reaction. I watched his face crumble like a rejected budget proposal. For the first time since all of this began, the composed hospital administrator was at a loss for words. His usual confidence, his administrative smugness, had all vanished in an instant, and I won't lie, I did feel a certain satisfaction watching him process the consequences of his actions. After everything he had put me through, seeing him finally face some real consequences was like watching justice being served in the hospital boardroom. The dangerous moment. He started yelling at me, dropping all pretense of professional composure. Gone was the polished hospital administrator. Now he was just a man losing everything. He called me vile and disgusting for ruining his life, screaming about how he wished he had cheated on me sooner. I just shook my head and asked him to leave, as this entire conversation was becoming as pointless as his quarterly performance reviews. Then Michael got aggressively close to me, his face inches from mine as he kept yelling, making me feel like a cornered patient. At this point, my parents, who had been in the other room trying to give me some privacy, came out to check on me since they could hear Michael's uncontrolled shouting. When my dad saw Michael practically pinning me against the wall, his administrative mask completely gone, replaced by pure rage, everything happened very quickly. My dad, who had never approved of Michael's corporate attitude, rushed over and pulled him away from me. Then I watched as my father, protecting his daughter like he would a patient in distress, punched Michael square in the face. Michael stumbled backward, his perfectly groomed appearance now disheveled, unable to process what had just happened. Then my dad, towering over him like an angry chief of staff, grabbed him by his expensive collar, dragged him out, and shoved him off our property. The aftermath. I watched as my dad threatened him loudly that if he ever showed his face again, it would be the last day on this earth. Since then, there's been complete silence from Michael. No more administrative emails. No more professional courtesy calls. Nothing. I guess being punched in the face finally made him understand that he couldn't manage this situation like one of his hospital departments. He hasn't called or texted, and I finally found some peace. I'm so grateful my dad stood up for me, and I can't wait to divorce this horrible man and close this chapter of my life for good. 8 months later. It's been 8 months since my last update. I just wanted to let everyone know how things have turned out. As for my pregnancy, I did give birth, and my daughter has been doing wonderfully. I chose to deliver at a different hospital, away from all the gossip and drama of my workplace. Michael's parents have set up a trust fund for her, including shares in the hospital group, and have continued to visit us regularly. They want nothing to do with their son, and have completely removed him from both the family and the hospital's administrative hierarchy. I've finally gotten the divorce I wanted from my ex-husband, and have full custody of my child. For now, the only thing Michael is responsible for is sending child support, which, given his reduced position at a smaller clinic across town, isn't nearly as much as his former hospital administrator salary would have provided. But I don't care. My daughter and I are doing fine without his executive-level income. Furthermore, he didn't fight me over anything during our divorce proceedings and ended up paying a hefty alimony due to his affair. Ashley occasionally sends messages through mutual hospital colleagues, but overall, she's kept her distance since transferring to a different unit, which is the greatest gift she could have given me after everything she put me through. I don't think she and Michael will ever get back together, but honestly, I don't care anymore about hospital politics or relationship drama. I am currently focused on my work in hospital administration, having received a promotion to a better position in a different department, and raising my daughter to be a good human being. Sometimes I see Michael in the hospital corridors when he comes for mandatory meetings, but he always takes a different route now, avoiding my department entirely. That's all that matters. My daughter and I are building a new life, free from administrative manipulation and family betrayal.